Tyler, joining us from New York City. What a privilege it is to have you here. You're in the middle of a snowstorm, right?
Yes, there is so much snow, and I love New York City, but right
Mhm.
now it is literally the untidiest, dirtiest place ever. So if you can imagine the mounds of snow, because we had over a foot of snow last week,
Mm,
essentially it just sits on all the sidewalks, and the dogs use the
mm.
sidewalks. And then you have the trash that collects because all of our sanitation workers have been trying to move the snow. So I did unbury my car at the beginning of the week,
Mm.
but it is just that ugly, gross, dirty, sloppy mess. But here's hoping that warmer temperatures will come soon.
I hear you. I would say I'm coming to you from sunny Georgia, although it's not that sunny here. Uh,
Yeah, and you've had cold too.
we have,
So it's like everyone is in this season of like, when is it going to get warmer?
yes,
It's dark, it's cold. And I feel like this is the season where you don't make any rash life decisions. Because if so,
absolutely.
we would all just pack up and move to the much warmer temperatures.
That's
So
right. Yeah. Equator, here I come.
I know, I know.
But thanks for joining us. I followed your work on Instagram, Tidy Dad, and I resonate with that. And I resonate with a lot of what you do. Your story of all the snow and all the things makes me anxious just thinking about it. And I know you're a lot of the same way. That brings you
Hmm.
some angst there, and that leads you to be Tidy Dad. But hey, before we jump into your work, I'd love for us just to get to know you a little bit better. Can you introduce us to who you are and kind of where you find yourself there in New York?
Yeah. So Tidy Dad, it's always been sort of this superhero sort of name, but also it's sort of a pen name of sorts that I've used to write about tidying and organizing and cleaning, but also what it means to live in a small space with a family. My actual name is Tyler, but the T and the T sort of go together.
Yeah,
By day, I'm a New York City public school teacher. I'm a dad of three. I have three daughters, 10, 8, and 5. My wife and I have been married 18 years almost. We met
awesome.
the first day of eighth grade. We were like college sweethearts, and then we got married right after school. But I'm originally from Kentucky. So this like small space apartment living, it was actually always a dream of mine when I was a kid that when I thought about where do I want to go, what do I want to do, I always thought someday I want to live in New York City. And
Wow.
so 15 years ago, my wife and I moved sort of as a little experiment of what would it be like to live in New York. We thought we would be here for a couple of years, and then a couple of years has quickly turned into 15 years.
Yeah.
But it's a joy to be able to share some of our experiences, some of what life looks like here, some of the tips that we have to make life sustainable with now a much larger audience.
Yeah, love that. And I didn't know that about you, that you're from Kentucky, Bluegrass State.
Mhm.
So you're not all that unfamiliar with the Southern accents.
No, no, no. But I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. So
Louisville.
it's
Yeah.
interesting because you have like Northern Kentucky and then you have the
Yes.
rest of the state. So if
Yes.
you talk to my mom has a very Southern drawl. But I was actually stopped by someone last night and they were like, "Are you from Wisconsin?" And I'm like, "No, but my great grandma was,
Hmm.
so I've lost the accent a little bit in the 15 years. But when I'm back, there are those bright night lights, which is what
There you go.
when I went to college, it was on the Tennessee Kentucky border. So
Nice.
I'm very familiar with it. So it
I
brings
hear
me
you.
back home.
All right. Yeah, and it's not Louisville. Uh,
No,
for
it
anybody out
is
there
not.
listening, it is not
It is
Louisville.
not. It is
Louisville.
not.
I've got some friends from the area, so that's awesome. Um, one of the things I wanted to ask you is before you were Tidy Dad, what was the impetus for you that made you start this journey towards organization and sharing some of this with the world? What did life look like before Tiny Dad?
Yeah.
Tidy Dad,
So
not Tiny
before,
Dad. You're normal
no,
size.
I am normal size, but my apartment is very tiny, which would make it a good name. Before Tidy Dad, I found myself in a place where many people are when they're really young, starting out a family. So my wife and I, we were in our small space. We had our first daughter, and then 2 years later, we had our second daughter.
Hmm.
At the same time that we were growing our family, I was really pursuing my career. And I feel like that's so difficult for people at this life stage because you're simultaneously expanding family, but you're also supposed to be expanding career at the same time. But yet those two can often feel at odds or tension with one another.
Yes.
So I was a teacher. The way that you make more money as a teacher is you move into the administrative track. That's what my dad had done. He had been very successful. So I thought I should just do the exact same. But I found myself completely overwhelmed with those administrative duties while also caring for my family. And it really felt at odds with, am I actually spending my time the way that I want to be spending it? I felt
Yes.
like I was working all of these hours trying to get better at a job, where in turn I was actually sacrificing time with family. So Tidy Dad started after I made the decision to step back from school administration, return to the classroom and teach, while we were also trying to make our small space work for our family. So we
Mm.
decided to switch bedrooms. We gave our daughters the larger bedroom. We took the smaller bedroom. And so I thought, could I document some of what is unfolding in our apartment? Because in New York City, so many people move outside of the city as soon as their kid turns 2 or 3, that all of our friends were starting to leave. And so
Sure.
selfishly, I thought maybe I could inspire more of them to stay in their apartments. And I didn't want to lose any more friends. But then it sort of gradually built into something more, because underlying all of the work as Tidy Dad is not this obsessive compulsive sort of control on organization. It really is this idea that tidying and organizing, this idea of bringing order to things, can actually help make space
Yes.
for what's actually important. And so sharing that message, I feel like, is what continues to resonate with people.
I love that, and it resonates with me because we tend to think of like neat freaks, right?
Hmm.
People that just absolutely, OCD, cannot stand things to be out of place. So we tend to think about organization, tidying up, having a place as control.
Hmm.
But one of the things that you challenged me in as I followed you is that it's actually freedom. Is freeing you up to do the things you want to be doing, and
Hmm.
uh, and that's helpful. It's
Hmm.
helpful in this period of life that I find myself in, and I think a lot of other people do as well. We have 3 kids. I shared with you about the same age as yours, and we're both full time working parents. And it's tough because you work all day, and you come home and you have the kids' routines. You've got the dinner routine, and then you've got the bedtime routine, and it feels like that's it between that and
Right.
homework.
Right.
That's that. And then, you think through it and you're like, okay, when are the things that have to be done? The laundry, the
Hmm.
picking up the toys and all of those things. When is that going to be done? Well, a lot of times for us, it has been on weekends. And that's the time you want to spend with your family and that
Right.
quality time. And there just reaches a point where when you do that weekend after weekend after weekend, that you're like, why am I doing this?
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
really that's the freedom we're talking about, is a little bit every day, and we'll get into some of this, but a little bit every day buys you freedom on the weekends, buys you freedom when
Absolutely.
you want it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you don't like doing the work, then can you somehow eliminate it or get rid of it? For example,
Yeah.
I don't personally like my brother in law and my sister, they have 5 acres that they live on. They
Hmm.
have this beautiful farmhouse, but my brother in law has to spend almost 5 hours every Saturday in the seasons when grass grow mowing that yard. And
Yeah.
I'm like, personally, for me, I do not want that. If it brings you joy to take care of your lawn, then do it.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, then just give up the lawn. And I always joke that like Central Park is our backyard, but it's always there. I can take my
Yeah.
kids to go and play, but yet I don't personally have to take care of it. And so I think that the more we can assess decisions that we've made, the types of work that we enjoy doing, the types of work that we don't enjoy doing, that helps to provide so much clarity and helps us make decisions that can impact other things in life.
Well, and you mentioned the phrase "bring you joy," and I think to some degree you were influenced by Marie Kondo's work. Is
Hmm.
that right? Yeah. Can
Hmm.
you talk about that a little bit? Does this bring you joy? Does this spark joy? That has that feel of her. As I've read through some of her works, can you share how she's influenced you in some way?
Yeah. So It's interesting because around the same time that I started sharing as Tidy Dad, Marie Kondo had a show on Netflix called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo,
Yeah.
which was really how many people in America were first introduced to Marie Kondo. She
Right.
obviously has her books that are worldwide bestsellers, but one of the prevailing things that I heard from people was that this didn't seem to be realistic with kids.
Yeah.
But what I actually found was that so many of her principles, as I was working through my stuff first, I feel like one of the biggest takeaways, especially when you're talking about that question of does this spark joy or not, it goes to that question of being able to assess what to keep or what to move out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that question, a lot of people make fun of it. Or, even as a Christian myself, there is this like, is this some sort of like voodoo question? That idea of holding the object and
Yeah.
asking whether it sparks joy, that idea of holding the object and saying thank you to it before you give it away. And Marie Kondo, I don't know what her religious beliefs are, but the more I think about some of the principles, the more I can actually reflect back on them
Yeah.
in my own Christian walk myself. That idea of gratitude or of thanks for the things that we've been given before choosing to sort of get rid of them. And I do feel like it was a practice at first that again felt really silly. But the more that I thought about, do I need this object for my life today? Am I holding on to this for some sort of sentimental reason, but it actually doesn't hold much weight or value? It's a really foundational question that's just one of many questions that we ask when we are assessing what to
Sure.
keep and what to move out. Because the goal for our home is to be the place where life unfolds. It's not this storage unit. It's not this archive of everything that we've experienced in life. We have to make space for
Yeah.
life to unfold. And so I do think that question of does it spark joy or not? I do feel like that can be a very powerful question.
I do too. And that hits on, like you said, a lot of those Christian values of gratitude. And then one is simplicity. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't realize that simplicity is, actually a spiritual discipline
Yeah.
practiced over the centuries. And man, how needed is that in our world today to get back to this simple mindset of we don't. It's countercultural in our world today. We don't need to have all the things. One of the things I shared with the group that I pastor recently is the idea that storage buildings are a multi-billion-dollar industry in America. We have some, and in some cases that's needed
Hmm.
if you do have a small space and you can't store some things. But by and large, I think that speaks wholly to the fact that we live in a world where we always want more and more and more.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
we have so much that we can no longer fit these things in our home, so we have to pay to have another place to put all of our stuff. And one of the things I like about what you're doing is, yeah, it is tidying up what you have, but there is also this process of going through and saying, do I even need this?
Hmm.
You'd mentioned, I think, in your Substack that you'd gone through and gotten rid of some clothes recently,
Yes.
things you haven't worn. And so, practically speaking, I'm just interested talking here to Tidy Dad. What's your approach as you go through your closet? Because I did the same thing recently. And somebody at Goodwill is extremely happy right now.
Yeah.
I feel like I've cleaned out half my closet. But what's your approach as you're going through something like that? That's just as simple as looking at all the clothes you have and what do I need all of these?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So my closet is very small. It's 14 inches wide. It's 7 feet tall. And I've really had to think about for myself, how can I just simplify the process of
Yeah.
getting dressed every day? And so years ago, I established this capsule wardrobe for myself that I really have these like four core colors that I wear. The idea is that all of the pieces can mix and match. But something I did recently was I had my colors analyzed. So color analysis, it was like all the rage back in the 70s and 80s. And it has had a popular resurgence. I
Yeah.
like to think that I'm now on the frontier of men having their colors analyzed because a lot of women have been talking about it. It's been all over my social media. It's that idea of you get yourself draped and they put different tones, and you basically figure out what season are you, and then what's your like level of brightness. So I am a bright winter. The shirt that I'm wearing right now, it's this like emerald color, which
Mhm.
fits into my bright winter palette. But the idea is that it's just another sort of tool that I've been using to establish a criteria for what to keep and what to move out. I feel like
Yeah.
clothing is so deeply personal to us. No
Hmm.
one else wears our clothing. We are the ones who want to feel good in what we wear. We want patterns or prints. There are certain fits of shirts or pants that we like. There's the way that the shirt like fits around our wrist. There's so many different questions that we can start to ask ourselves. And I think that when it comes to stuff, I always recommend the decluttering process of clear, sort, assess, and plan. The
Hmm.
idea is you clear the space, you sort the stuff, you assess what to keep and what to move out, and then you make the plan for how are you actually going to organize it. But with assess, I think people feel silly, really questioning and interrogating their why for keeping an article of clothing. And I think especially as men, like I think that stereotypically we think of women thinking of clothes much more often than men, but we also have our own preferences.
Yeah.
We have our own insecurities about our bodies. We have our own feelings about what makes us feel good or what doesn't. We use clothing to represent who we are or communicate a message. And so I think that by really interrogating what we want to keep and what we want to move out, that decision making process for something that's as low stakes as clothing can then be applied to much more higher stakes questions of what do I want to do with my finances? How many hours a week do I want to work? How many children do we want to have? How close do we want to live to our in-laws? What type of house do we want to have? Do I need a new car or am I fine with the used car? Why am I triggered when I go over to my friend's house and their house is 3,000 square feet larger than my own? Those are actually the bigger, deeper, more consequential questions. But I do feel like starting with something as inconsequential seeming as clothing can help that decision making process. And so that's when I think that's what we're touching on here is that this idea of tidying, there are so many other deeper values that are unearthed through asking those seemingly simple questions.
Yeah. Beautiful. You say it so well, and I think that resonates with us. I'm intrigued by the by the color matching. I'm going to have to look into that a little
Yeah,
bit.
it would be fascinating. And there,
Yeah.
you can go to a person. There are also lots of AI things right now. You just
Hmm.
take a photo and it has to be really clear, bright lighting. And the idea is that we all sort of have this color palette. You can wear really most color palettes, you can wear any color. It really just is about matching the right shade. So I'm a bright winter. My wife is a deep autumn. So it's fascinating because someone asked me yesterday, they were like, do you and your wife complement each other? Like, do your colors, when you think of those family photos and everybody has to
Right.
wear something matching, we've just learned how do we have different shades that sort of
Hmm.
complement and go well together. But it's fascinating.
It
You can
is.
do all of these deep dives. It's crazy.
It is. Um, and one of the things that so in regards to decluttering, one of the things that I did starting January 1st of this year, is I'm leading. Matter of fact, we're still doing it. I'm leading a group of men in what we call the 40 Grit Challenge. It's a challenge I created where you do three things every day. I integrate body, mind, and soul. It's a big part of what I do. It's a big part of, I think, how God made me and how He trained me through my training as a pastor and pharmacist. But learning to see things as interconnected.
Hmm.
The physical is not all that separate from the mental or all that separate from the spiritual. We are whole bodies. And so they do one physical activity a day. There's a workout involved. There's a gratitude mindset prompt every day. And then there's a devotion and a scripture that goes with it. We also like to have this communication on the app that we use. And something came up in that group. And somebody said, I'm getting my body together. I'm feeling good about myself. We're starting the year well. I really want this to be part of my life in more ways than just this app. I'm going to start decluttering my house. And somebody else said, "Ooh, that's a really good idea. I need to start doing that too." And so a group of these guys that are, they're focusing on body, mind, and soul, but as an outpouring of getting their life in a more predictable rhythm,
Hmm.
they found themselves wanting to organize and declutter as well. One of the things that I like about what you teach, Tyler, is that you speak about that intertwining of the physical and the mental. Physical clutter also speaks about mental clutter. And I've seen that in my life, and I saw that in those guys too. What is it about the mind? What is it, and maybe even tied in some spiritual practices here,
Hmm.
that really kind of plays into this decluttering process?
Well, I think that there's this huge misconception, especially with men, that men don't see clutter. And I
Mm,
think that I see it all the time on social media where it's all of these, I don't know who did these studies, but they say that there's this so much higher percentage of women who see clutter and how men basically don't see it at all. And I think that that's a huge misconception
yeah,
because I think that clutter, we all have different degrees of how much clutter can sort of impact us in our day to day life. But when you mentally feel like you're completely overwhelmed, when you are burning the candle at both ends, when you can't find your keys, when you feel like your finances are completely out of order, it leads to this sort of spiral domino effect that can then have these huge impacts on your physical health and
yeah,
also your physical environment. And even if you think about when we're at our busiest, oftentimes one of the first things to go is even just like eating healthy because
yeah,
we don't have time to go to the grocery to cook the meal. The faster thing is just to grab fast food, order takeout, and that sort of cycle can continue. When you think
sure.
about even things like alcohol, that there are things that we do to just numb ourselves
Mm,
so that we aren't fully feeling and processing whatever sort of that stimulus is. And I think for each of us, it's so different. But, when you're talking about the physical health and even working out, it does take an amount of discipline. It takes
mm,
consistency. It takes having a plan. Like you don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to go out and run 10 miles. There are things that you have to do in order to make that goal possible. And I think that the same is true with our physical space.
sure.
That if there is a goal of, like with my wife and I, we want to make this 750 square foot apartment sustainable for our family.
Mm,
That was the goal. So it's like, okay, if that's the goal, then what are the steps that we are going to put into place in order to make that possible? We had to curb our spending and buying. We can't have a ton of new stuff coming in. We had to talk to the grandparents at holiday times and say, the amount of toy storage that we have is fixed. We
yes.
also don't need you to bring new things every time you come over. Our children love you. We are not equating love with material
Yeah.
possessions and gifts. There are
I'm
so many
amening all that.
little
Yeah.
things. There's so many little things that you can do and you can communicate to others that helps to reduce some of that mental clutter and some of that physical clutter, but
Mm,
it's also, sort of understanding that decluttering isn't a one and done process, that it's sort
mm.
of something that you're always sort of continuing and cycling through. And it's much easier when you have that very clear goal that you're working towards.
And I think that our environment shapes us more than we think it does. Um, you're right. When we get busy, our health, our physical health goes, our nutrition goes. We stop working out, and all of these things compound. But then you look around our houses, and our houses are much more cluttered as well.
Hmm.
All of those things go together. So to me, it's not shocking that when someone decides, "Hey, I'm going to get my life organized. I'm going to seek to be the healthiest version of myself, and I'm going to do that physically, mentally, and spiritually." It seems only natural that that would kind of pour out into wanting to change your environment to be a little more healthy as well. Um,
Hmm.
and I love how you kind of shift into that space where it's not just physical decluttering, it's not just organization for the sake of organization, but it really helps us make sense of our lives as a whole because our environment matters.
And I think that's my philosophy around tidying up your life. And even for me, my first book was published last January.
Hmm.
And so I found, it was that 6 weeks post book being published that there was this feeling of, oh my goodness, I've just spent almost 3 years of my life pouring into this huge monumental project that I was so proud of myself for. But I remember physically, I looked back at a recording of myself. I was on the Today Show the week that my book came out.
Hmm.
And I looked and I was like, I don't really recognize that guy. I
Well,
felt puffy. I had on a shirt that I feel like really fit well, but yet I could see that when I like moved my arms, the like button would open up. And I was like, I just don't physically feel good. And
hmm,
so I brought on a personal trainer that he works virtually with teachers. He actually
hmm,
is based in Liverpool, so he's all the way across the
nice.
pond. But I was like, how can I sort of throw money at this in a way that holds me accountable?
Sure.
But a year in, 30 pounds later that I've dropped, I've transformed my life. And it is
Awesome.
interesting to see how when we let ourselves go, you know, we also let other things sort of lapse. But
Yeah.
I even told him like I can't spend hours at the gym. And so even one of my new practices that I just posted about was I largely work out in the mornings, but while my coffee's brewing, I've learned to do a 10-minute yoga practice. That there's
Yeah.
this guy on YouTube, Manflow Yoga, that I'm like, let me just, while the coffee's brewing, let me do this 10-minute yoga warm up that
Yeah.
gets me ready for my workout. Then I always clean one area of the house each weekday. And so I've started doing a little devotional time where I found this devotional podcast and it literally plays and I listen while I'm cleaning the bathroom or cleaning the kitchen. And then I move on to my workout. But we're not talking about inventing time here because we all have the same amount of time in the day, but it really is this gradual layering of routines that you find opens up this other mental space or clarity to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah. That speaks a lot of the deeper things behind the decluttering, but you hit on something I wanted to kind of transition to for more practical things. You said you straighten a room every day during the week. That's
Hmm.
one of your big pushes, and I think that's one that we need to probably do better adopting in my house.
Well,
um,
it's hard because, you know, the joke that I always make is when you become, obviously time, when we become parents, there's always that joke of like, you have that coworker who doesn't have kids and they're like, oh my gosh, I am so tired. And when you
right?
become a parent, you're like, literally, time is yours. You have
Yes.
no one waking you up. You have no one screaming. You don't have a baby. So it's like, why are you saying that you're tired? But people are able to be tired. But, we used to do those marathon Saturday cleanings, and we
Yeah.
touched on that a little bit earlier. But if you're a parent, you're not going to do anything for a sustained period of time. You can't, let alone cleaning. That we would start cleaning, our 2-year-old would make a mess. It was just overwhelming. So that's
Yeah.
when I started could I clean one area of the house each weekday?
Hmm.
So for the past 7 years, I cleaned the bathroom on Monday, the kitchen on Tuesday, the living area on Wednesday, the bedrooms on Thursday, and the playroom on Friday. I can wake up in the morning and I just instinctually sort of like get started. And I'm talking about like the deep sort of like scrubbing, like cleaning the baseboards, wiping stuff down. But I feel like doing it every week, stuff doesn't build up. Like I'm
Yeah.
able to see what maintenance needs to be done. Someone did ask me, they were like, I can't believe that you're cleaning your bathroom again. And I was like, I think that we should, like, we do touch ups because we do have one bathroom between our family of five. But
Wow.
I was like, I don't think that it's weird to clean your
Hmm.
bathroom once a week. But that sort of rhythm,
Yeah.
it just works for our family.
Yeah.
There are chores that my children take on. My wife and I divvy up, the grocery shopping, doing laundry, what making dinner looks like at night. But
Hmm.
we have conversations around how are we going to divvy up all of this work because there is so much that needs to be done. But I do feel like taking the big task, divide it out over the week, just makes it feel a whole lot more manageable than waiting until the weekend when you're just worn out and exhausted.
I love that concept, and it kind of brings to mind the saying that a little bit every day is a task, and a lot at one time is a chore. Um,
Yes,
and
yes.
it takes it from that marathon chore to sustainable little tasks. And what that does the beauty of it all is what that does is it buys you back your time
Hmm.
when it matters the most.
Well,
Um,
and I had someone, they were like, that's great that you can clean your house in 15 minutes a day, 750 square feet, but what am I supposed to do with 5,000 square feet? And I'm like, you're gonna have to increase the amount of time that you spend cleaning. Like,
uh,
I don't think
yeah,
that people often, I think that there is, especially in American culture, there is this American dream of you pursue as much square footage as possible.
yeah,
But I don't think that people actually think about what is the cost of that going to be between
mm,
time and energy and resources and overall impact on your life. So if you want to clean a 5,000 square foot house, then buy the 5,000 square foot house.
yeah,
But if you don't want to, then don't, and be firmly okay with naming to people, we live in a 1,500 square foot house. We love that it gives us X, Y, or Z, and we don't desire more. And I think that the more people, and it goes back to the simplicity that you talk about,
yeah,
I think the more that people sort of share and justify sort of the reasons why they have simplified certain areas of their life, I think that it gives other people freedom to say, well, you know what? Maybe I would like to do that too. Or, you know what? This area of my life, I don't really care about. I'm not a car guy. So I
yeah.
don't need the latest, newest car. I don't want to take care of my yard. So we have a really small 1/4 acre lot, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't want to commute an hour to work every day. So we've decided that we're going to have a house in certain neighborhood so that I can have a walking commute or I can drive 15 minutes. All of those are decisions that we can make.
Yeah.
And I think we have to give ourselves freedom to do that.
I think a lot of people find themselves in a place where they've tried to please people so much that now they find themselves in a life they don't like.
Hmm.
Um, and Dave Ramsey says it best, I think. And like him or leave him doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I like this part. He says we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what that reminds me of is just, we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're trying to outdo our friends and our neighbors, and we want to have the best and the biggest and all of these things. And at the end of the day, is that really what's going to, and I'm going to borrow the term, bring you joy?
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
that really what's going to bring you the most meaning and satisfaction in life? And
No,
if it's
because
not, it's not too late
there's
to change.
always more. There's
Yeah.
always more. And last night I was at this event for, I get invited to different parties, and it was this really fun party for this new publishing house that they're publishing all of these books. And I walked up, it was right on Central Park. I walk up to this building and I was like, oh, this is a really nice school. This is beautiful. And I walk into the building and the man walks up to me and he's like, oh, so great of you to come to the party. This is my home. Welcome. And I was like, what are you talking about? So
Wow.
then I put in the address, as one does. You put in the address into Zillow. So I put the address into Zillow
Yeah.
and I realized that I was standing in a $23 million apartment.
Mm,
And I walk in and like there was this beautiful spiral staircase that I couldn't even see the end of, that I was like,
wow.
this townhouse has like 6 or 7 floors. And I was like, instead of wallowing in, oh my gosh, I have a 750 square foot apartment, I firmly was secure in the decisions that my wife and I have made for our family. And it's not to say that that man has sacrificed self or his children or his wife. I don't know what he did to make that money, but it was so nice to stand in that beautiful apartment and simply say, this is a really beautiful space,
Yeah.
and leave it at that. There was not jealousy.
Yeah.
There was not, oh, I wish I had this. When I walked back into my apartment, there wasn't this feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm not as good as him,
Mm,
or I don't have as much worth. It's so nice to walk into a $23 million apartment and say, that's really nice and beautiful for them. And he
yeah.
had a really pretty couch and a
Mm,
really pretty chandelier and really great food, and leave it at that.
yeah. And be glad you don't have to clean that.
And be glad that I don't have to clean it or walk up and down all of those stairs. But
Right.
his dining room did have those secret doors, that like
Yeah.
that like it was beautiful and wallpapered and you could like barely see the outline. And I was like, Okay,
That's
maybe
cool.
someday I would like a secret door,
Yeah, but I can do that in my house.
but
So
I can do that in my house. Yeah.
I love it. It's being content. Contentment is kind of the big thing here.
I think
And,
so. And it's a conscious choice that you have to make
yeah,
because daily we are confronted with it's these little stimuli that can trigger this feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm
mm,
not worthy enough. I'm not as great as so and so, or the feeling of, oh, but I wish I had this, or the if only I work a little bit harder, if I do a little bit more. But it
right.
is, how do you become so securely grounded in your why, or the what is my definition of just enough? That's
Yeah.
really what is freeing, because you can securely name to others, that $23 million apartment would be really nice, but I'm
Hmm.
actually very content with my 750 square foot apartment.
Yeah.
That is a huge moment.
Absolutely. And again, that's countercultural, but that's something that's within our ability, and I think that's what we're striving towards. You have so many practical tips on your Instagram, TikTok, website, and of course, we can't go into all those for time's sake today. I'd love to, but that would be a marathon of sorts. I do want to ask you this: out of all the hacks and tips and the different things you put into place, which one do you feel like has had the biggest payoff in your life?
So I feel like the biggest payoff, and it also is, I don't really stir up lots of controversy, but there's been this years long debate of early bird versus night owl.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me in this season of life, what continues to just give me so much sort of energy throughout my day is really embracing the early mornings. So I'm up at 5 a.m. every morning. I have to leave the house by 7:40 with my daughters to get to school. But it goes to this idea of first fruits, that I
Mm,
feel like I'm giving myself the first fruits of the day, and I'm caring for myself before I'm on for everyone else.
yeah.
Because there was a season where I woke up when my children woke me up, and I remember them like prying my eyelids open saying, "Daddy, it's time to get up."
Yes.
But the problem is that day to day, I never knew when they were going to wake me up.
Hmm.
Sometimes it was 4:30, sometimes it was 6, and I feel like I myself wasn't on a consistent rhythm.
Sure.
So, years ago, I started beating my children to the wake up clock. And so some season, for some
Yeah.
years I was up every day at 4:30, which meant
Yeah.
that after putting them to bed at night, I was asleep at 8:30
Hmm.
because I needed the sleep to get me through the day.
Yes.
Um, and to this day, waking up at 5, I feel like it's such a gift to be able to walk into the living room. The lights turn on because I programmed them to turn on at 5 a.m. Um, to like start the coffee pot brewing and it be silent. And
Yeah.
for me to just do my morning yoga stretch.
Yeah.
It's nice that then my girls, they sort of filter in. Every morning it's a different one who wakes up early, but it's nice that they know that their dad is always awake and there to greet them. And I'm
Yeah.
always excited to see them. Um, so I do feel like, I've had to sort of steal back time. But that idea of first fruits, I really do think about that it's not in a selfish way, because I mean, I guess one could call it selfish, but I do feel like by being selfish with my morning time, I'm able to be more fully present
Sure.
for my children, for the students that I have to teach every day. I'm just generally more pleasant than if I'm woken up and my eyelids are pried open and I'm on from the time that I get out of bed.
If you can't tell, I relate heavily to all of that. I'm the one that takes the kids to school in the morning. My wife goes to work earlier than I do. And so I love being the first one up and the first one in the living room and the kitchen. And then the kids filter in.
Yeah.
That's so much better than, yeah, Daddy, wake up.
I know, I
Um,
know. And it's the layering of routines. And you think about from your mornings, does it feel good to read a book? Does it feel
yeah,
good to clean? Does it
yeah,
feel good to go ahead and get your workout in? Because so often I was waiting for that my kids to go to bed to have that sort of like me time or
yeah,
choice time. But then I found that I just wanted to like veg out in
Yep.
the evenings, but I'm not waking up to veg out in the mornings. I'm waking up with energy, and it feels nice to just have this sort of quiet transition in before everything else unfolds.
Absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that's what fills me up and sounds like you as well. Um, Tyler, you're a gift, brother. I appreciate you spending this time with us. I'd love for you to tell our audience where they can find out more about you, your handles, your links, and that sort of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm Tidy Dad. I also have a book, which is
Mhm.
called Tidy Up Your Life, which is available wherever books are sold. I'm also on Substack. So I write as Tidy Dad, but it's called The Tidy Times. And then I have a little micro podcast that is called Tidy Tidbits. So basically, if you just Google Tidy, there will be Marie Kondo and then me.
And Tyler.
So
Yeah,
we sort of have, I'm proud to be Googleable just with tidy. So
there you go.
it'll come up. There aren't many tidy dads out there, but I think that there are more and more coming up. So
That's awesome. And I'll put links in the show notes for all of that as well. But can I just say, as a dad, I'm thankful that there's a tidy dad.
thanks.
There's a lot of people in this space of organization, kind of bringing joy in all of this. But sometimes I'm just going to say, as a dad, I notice the clutter and it bothers me, but I don't always have the answers for it.
Yeah.
And you've given us and my family some practical tips that we've put into place that really helps us. And I'm excited for you to be able to do the same for our listeners today. So thank you, Tyler. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for this passion project of yours. And thanks for being here on the Rev Rx podcast today.
Thanks for having me.